This is Kathy from Gadget Stop 321, and in today's video I'm going to be taking a look at Krishna Lyrebird Green. I'll be testing it in a variety of pins and nib sizes ranging from a Pilot Extra Fine to a 1.5 stub, and I'm going to begin with the Pilot 78G with an extra fine stainless steel nib. This feels nice. I can usually tell when I start writing with the extra fine nib if it's going to be a well-behaved ink, and so far in my writing samples that I've done on other papers, this has been a really well-behaved ink, and I like that. It's a little bit of a pale color, but not so pale that the legibility is poor on this extra fine. This has just enough brightness to it that it's got some legibility. Okay, next I have a Perera with a fine steel nib. Now, initially I was kind of disappointed in this ink, and I like that even better. It's just enough wider that I like the read back with this fine nib. Like I was saying, initially I was disappointed in this ink because it's called Lyrebird Green, and it's called several different names. Some places you'll see it called Lyrebird Green, some places it's called Lyrebird Water Green, sometimes it's called Waterproof Green. But when I got this sample, the picture on the website where I got the sample at Van Ness showed kind of a more grassy green, and this, when I wrote with it with all my other green ink samples, is really coming across really blue. And so just that it not meeting my expectations, I was kind of disappointed. But as I write with this, it's a well-behaved ink, and now that I'm not thinking about it being a green ink, I kind of like it. Alright, next I have a Pilot Custom 74 with a 14 karat fine nib. And I think I like this even more. This Custom 74 puts down a nice amount of ink for a fine nib, and see that? I like the boldness of it, even more color. And this is because there's so much ink, it's nice and smooth. Alright, and this color, I guess, and even this time of year, it's summertime, this color reminds me of a swimming pool. It's just a nice, refreshing color. Alright, next I have Kaveco Perkeo with a medium nib. This is the all black. And I'm seeing, it looks like I might see some shading with this medium nib. I'm not normally a fan of medium nibs, but when you have a nice ink that's going to demonstrate some shading, I think this is going to be nice. It's nice watching the ink go down and puddle up in certain areas. Alright, next I have a Pilot Metropolitan with a cursive medium nib. Oh, this feels nice. This cursive medium nib is hit and miss. You've got to have a nice, I don't know, I guess just a well-behaved ink. And that was very smooth. All right, I don't think I'm not seeing quite as much shading with this one, but it was nice and pleasant, nice and smooth to write with. All right, next I've got a Nemo singularity with a 0.6 stub nib. Again, this is just really smooth. Okay, and finally, Hound X750 with a 1.5 stub nib. Every one of these inks, it was just nice and satisfying to write with. Just the way the ink flows out of the nib, it's nice and smooth. All right, while that dries, I'm going to take a look at some writing samples on other paper. In my ARC notebook, this is a thicker, more absorbent paper. The extra fine I put, it was not scratchy. It wasn't, I wouldn't call it nice to write with, but it wasn't scratchy. The Perera was nice. Really, everything was nice. The only reason I didn't put nice on these last two, they were just a little too wet, and so it felt a little sloppy, like the ink was starting to spread. You can see jagged edges on the letters there. But everything from a fine up to the mediums were nice. And let's see. You can maybe see a little shading there on the Perkeo. Very pleasant. On my Rhodia paper, the extra fine was not scratchy, but it wrote such a fine line that the legibility, I didn't think was that great. With the fine nib, it was a little bit better, but then when I got to the Custom 74, this little range here from the gold fine nib down to the Nemo sign, those are the ones I really liked. And this was very satisfying to write with. I just don't write with the 1.5 stub nib on a regular basis. But I just couldn't pick a favorite out of that group. They were all nice. On my 20-pound copy paper, it soaked into the paper really quickly. So these wetter nibs, even up to the Custom 74, they were just too wet to really write on the paper comfortably. The Perera was the best. The steel fine nib, it was very comfortable to write with. And let's see, really, it's kind of a bleedy ink. It wanted to kind of bleed through. The Perera didn't do too bad, but it might just be the nib I have. It runs a little bit on the dry side. But it's a pale colored ink, so it doesn't show up too terribly bad. All right, in my Leuchtturm, nothing spectacular. There's no shading. I don't really see any sheen. When it's going down kind of heavy, you can see kind of a halo of darker ink. It's I call it pretty pleasant. I thought it was boring at first, but it's actually really pretty. And let me bring my copy paper back. I think it's a good color to use with like these limey greens. Those two really go good together. And the reason I mention that is I think this is the notebook that I had like some Bible study stuff in, where I take notes. Yeah, like where I'll have a primary color and then a secondary color. That one, it doesn't show up as much. It's the, let's see, that was, oh, here it shows up a little bit better, where I have like my primary note-taking color and then like a highlight color. That's what I will probably use something like this for. It's a pretty just pale kind of color. Let me see if there was anything interesting that showed up. I'm not really seeing any sheen to speak of, but there is, you do see on the nibs that write a little heavier, a little halo of the darker ink. There's a little bit of shading, depending on what nib you put it in. In my Pilot Metropolitan, it doesn't tend to show a lot of shading. Really, the Kaveco Perkeo is the only one that I'm seeing it in. So it has to be a nib that really shows that off. Even in this stub nib, it's pretty flat. But this color has grown on me. Alright, and another thing, just using it in this variety of nibs and seeing how well it performs makes me like it a lot more than I did before also. Alright, if you found this video helpful, please give me a thumbs up, and if you'd like to see more videos like this, please subscribe to my channel.